Hello Year 6, we're working on our extreme biomes. So at the moment you can see a triangular piece of paper here. This is going to make the background to one of my 4 extreme environments. So the idea is, and I'll just show you, hopefully you've constructed one of these already. Don't worry if yours is looking all floppy like mine. Once the backgrounds are glued in, it will all be propped up nice and straight. So you're going to make 4 extreme environments. One here, one here, one here, and one here. The first step is to make the background for all 4. And the background is made on this triangular piece of paper. So in my example I showed you before, I had a volcanic background. For this one, I'm going to do under the sea. Now, the idea with the project is it's an extreme environment. So it shouldn't be like your cozy living room. It should be something that's really hot or really cold or really deep or really dark. Something that is extreme. So under the sea, technically, is extreme because human beings cannot live for a sustained period underwater. Certainly we can't live without oxygens or submarines or those sorts of things. So under the sea. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I look up some source material. And by that I mean I look up a background, something that I want to use as my inspiration for my drawing. So I'm at the moment looking, you can't see it, it's on my screen, I'm looking at a little under the sea backdrop that I'm going to copy. So the first thing I'm going to do is the foreground. And in the foreground I've got kind of like they kind of look like a cross between shells and rocks actually. So I'm going to put in this kind of like rock thing here. The next thing I've got in my foreground, and the reason I'm working from front to back is so that things in the background don't overlap my foreground. So I do the things closest to the perspective of the onlooker first. So I'm putting in these kind of almost like little rock tables that are piled up here. Okay, so there's another little rock table there. A tip I want you to take on board is please make sure the sketching is light. You don't want it to overpower your painting, okay? Remember, keep it light until it's right. If you push really, really hard with pencil when you're doing this step, it will always kind of like glare through your paint. And if you've made any mistakes, they're hard to hide as well if you've pushed really hard with pencil. Right, so a couple little details. I'm going to put a little shell, like snaily shell here. I'm going to put like a conical shell here. So I'm starting to build up objects in this background. Okay, so there's a little shell there. And then over here I'm putting some kind of, I don't know, I guess they're anemones, but they're all hidden inside at the moment. They haven't popped out. So there's one, there's another one there. Now, when you're using your source material, your version doesn't have to look exactly the same. You're just using it for ideas, because when you're making a background, I could just easily paint this whole thing blue and say, there you go, there's my under the sea background, but it's not very artistic. So we're creating something, hopefully, that looks more artistic than just plain old blue. Right, next to these anemones, I'm starting to put in some kind of like seaweedy type things. So again, all I'm doing is following things that are in the foreground and things that are in the background. So they're growing there. And let's see, over here I'm going to have some more kind of under the sea plants. Okay, so these are like kind of like a bit like kelp, I think, growing here. So let's put some over here, some more kelp growing, kind of like in finger shapes. And then out of the kelp, let's do some more seaweed. I'm making this like a kelp bush. Okay, and then let's see here, let's have sort of sandy area down the bottom. And then I'm going to have a kind of a rocky area here. So these are kind of like a little under the sea cave almost I'm making. And then here I'm just going to have a little bit of seaweed growing out of the sea floor. Let's see, let's have some contour lines here to show that it's an uneven surface. Let's have some more seaweed growing here. Okay. Right, I think that's enough pencil drawing for now. I'm going to start adding in my paint layer. So I've got my pots of water and my brush. I've got my lid for mixing in. I've got my watercolour paints. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add water to my lid, because I don't want my pigment to mask my pencil drawing, because if I can't see my pencil anymore, I can't see my outlines, and I'm not going to be able to follow my outlines. So I'm going to start with the seafloor, and I'm going to use a mixture of yellow and then mustard. So I'm going to have two kind of sandy-ish colours for the bottom. So let's get a little bit more of that yellow. Right, so I'm just going to paint in. I'm going to kind of have like layers of different sandy colours. So let's put in some dark here, make that a little bit darker. So I'm having some areas that are lighter, some areas that are darker. I'm being careful not to go over, or at least avoid as best as I can, some of my outlines. So let's put these in here. Mix a bit more of this mustardy coloured. So let's put some here. And I'm holding it down because these backgrounds have a fold in the centre. So it might be a good idea not to fold them until the painting's completely finished and dry. Because when you're painting, if it's a bit folded, it kind of like, it might creep up in the middle a bit, like mine's doing. Okay, so there's my seafloor. Use a bit of water. Now, the thing with watercolours is, if you start painting straight away next to wet paint, the paint likes to join hands. It likes to grab onto the colour next door to it. So you have to make sure when you're painting adjacent areas that you've given it a chance to dry, or that you've kind of done the even quicker approach of maybe like dabbing it with a tissue, so that all of the wet paint has been kind of dried up. Okay, so that's going to be my seabed. I'm just going to, in my lid over here, I think. Now, I really should clean my water, but I'm not going to because I want to do this demonstration for you. But yellow and blue make green. So if I'm going straight from yellow and then mixing my blue, I'm in danger of making it turn green. So just keep that in mind when you're doing colour mixing. Right, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow the outline of my cave up here. And then I'm going to use water to blend this out from around the edge of my object here. So let's just fill up these gaps with blue. And then before it dries, I'm going to blend it in with water. And the effect, hopefully, this has is it creates a nice gradient going from dark to light. Okay, so I'm getting lighter and lighter as I get down here. Okay, and now I'm going to add in my my cave area that's going around the top here. So I think I'm going to use this mustardy colour, and when I add the black to it, it kind of goes like a murky green. So I'm going to add a bit more blue because it's going to be like a greyish blue for my rocks around the top here. So I'm going to make the rocks around here like a darkish murky blue. Okay, and I'm going to avoid painting over my seaweed if I can. Okay. There we go, there's my cave. Now, what we've got going on at the top is kind of what I was describing, where the paint, when it finds another wet area, it will spread into that area. So I'm going to just use my tissue to dry that slightly. Okay, right, now I'm going to use this same grey colour for these rocks that I've made. So let's see, I've got a rock here. I'm just going to put in some of the main outlines with blue. Don't fall into the trap of outlining everything in black. A lot of children, in their mind's eye, think everything has a black outline. It does not have a black outline, okay? But you can use a darker shade to make your outline. But just don't assume that everything is black, because the outlines are just usually a shadowy colour of the object itself. So if the object's green, the outline ought to be a dark kind of green. And if the object's grey, like a rock, the outline is just going to be a dark grey. Okay, so there's my rocks, and I'm literally just going to fill them in with water now. Okay, water, water. And what happens, the water picks up the pigment that's still a teeny bit wet, and it blends it in. So you get like a lighter shade of grey. All right then, so now I'm going to just blot my paper, because I'm starting to get this effect where the wet watercolours are going to start bleeding into each other. So without scrubbing it or rubbing it, I'm going to lay the tissue on the top and just blot it. Now this will take some of the pigment out, but sometimes that actually looks kind of cool when that happens. So let's take that away. There we go. Right then, my next step is I'm going to mix, and sometimes it helps if you're done with the colour, you just clean your lid so you don't corrupt any new colours. So I'm going to use this blue here, and I'm going to lighten it up a bit. I'm going to lighten it up for my kelp, and I'm going to add some of this green, this light green. Okay, and then maybe a bit of yellow. Yeah, that's kind of a funky colour. So I'm going to paint my kelp here, and I'm going to do the same technique I used with the rocks. I'm just going to do the outline. I'm just doing the outline here. You can see it's really watery. I can still see all my pencil outlines. And then I'm going to clean my brush off, and just using water, I'm going to just fill in the gaps. And it just naturally creates a gradient where the paint's slightly stronger in one area than another. All right, I do these anemones now. These are going to be purple, so I'm going to mix. I've got kind of a pinky red already, so I'm going to get that, and then I'm going to steal a little bit of blue, and then I'm going to lighten it with a bit of white. Oh, that's a nice colour. I might make it a little bit more on the red, the pinky end of the spectrum. All right, so I'm going to do the same technique I've been doing. I'm going to just make my outlines with the purple. Let's see, is there anything else I need to make purple? No, that's good. So my outlines are made with purple. clean my brush off, and then just with water, I just fill in the gaps. Okay. There we go. And then, I'm just going to clean my brush off. The top of my anemones, I'm going to just make yellow. Okay. Let's see if I've got any more other yellow I need to use. Okay, right, now I'm going to make my seaweed, and I'm going to make it as, I'm actually going to use this kelp green, but I'm going to mix a different shade of green. It's really nice to use different shades of the same colour, okay? Don't just use the exact shade you've got in your palette. Try and experiment with mixing it so you've got a variety of shades. So here's a slightly darker green. Doing the same technique I've been doing all along. Just putting in just the rough outlines and then filling the rest in with water. Okay, so there's, oh, let's not forget these guys down here. Okay, and then just going to fill it in with water. Okay. There we go. And then last but not least, I'm going to be a bit lazy, and I'm just going to reuse this purple for my shell. There you go, Shelley. And it's a bit too lazy if I put two shells next to each other exactly the same, so I am going to. First of all, I'm going to blot this shell because it's going to bleed into my little snail shell there. And then I'm going to be lazy, and I'm going to do this reddy colour straight from the palette, which is a bit naughty. I should dilute it first. So let's just, all right, and then I'm going to blot that. There we go. Right then, so that is my under the sea background. Now when it dries, if I feel like it's not vibrant enough, I can always, you know, emphasize the outlines using something like a coloring pencil. So let me just show you what I mean. Let's just blot some of this wetness away. So with coloring pencils, you can add in some of these outlines, just redefining where the edges are. Okay, there we go. So hopefully this has given you the idea. Now you are making 4 backgrounds, 4 different backgrounds. Use all these tips, even if it's not an under the sea one, use these tips to help you with your other backgrounds. So top tip, use source material, okay? Look up an example of the background that you're hoping to make. Look it up online and use that as your inspiration, okay, as your starting point. It's always going to turn out nicer if you are, you know, using something artistic to inspire you. Okay. Hopefully this has given you the idea of what a finished one might look like. And again, you can vary your shades of green. I've just outlined all of this in exactly the same shade of green, but you could, if you wanted to, use different shades. Okay, and then the rocks, you can probably, not everyone has a grey pencil, so I guess you could use a black, even though I said try to avoid black outlines, but I guess when something's grey and you haven't got a grey pencil, then if you don't, as long as you kind of go gently, you can put in a black, just a subtle black outline to show where these rocks are. Okay, let's do over here. Right, now you've got 4 of these backgrounds to make, so this is not something I want you to rush. This part of the project should take you probably 4 lessons, okay? So don't rush them, take your time, and good luck with your 4 backgrounds, right? Thank you, Year 6.